Welcome to the Broncos Source Podcast.
Good evening, Broncos fans, or bad evening, or it's probably not a good evening for Broncos fans. But thank you for tuning in and listening to the Broncos Source Podcast. Steven is not with us again this week. He's got a lot of work stuff going on, and I can definitely relate to that, as can Sean. We're able to carve out a little bit of time tonight and talk to everybody about the Broncos game. So I'm your host, Mile Jaimez, along with Sean, aforementioned here. And Sean, we're here to talk about the latest, what should we call it? It wasn't really a collapse by the Broncos. It was a
missed opportunity.
It was a missed opportunity, yeah. And I think right off the bat, you and I were arguing yesterday because they decided to take the football, and I thought that was a really stupid decision against the Bengals, because if you're down at the half against the Bengals and then you give them the football, again, with Joe Burrow, that's not really going to be a good decision. It ended up being not as bad for the Broncos as I thought, but it still gave them an extra 3 points, essentially. And on that first drive, it was 3rd and 2, and it's just like, Sean Payton was probably the main reason why the Broncos lost the game yesterday, in my opinion. And we'll get into the other reasons, like Joe Burrow just absolutely torching the Broncos defense all night long. But I really, really, Sean, want to get your thoughts on the coaching decisions that came into play yesterday in a big, big way, and ultimately, in my opinion, at least cost the Broncos the football game.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, you and I, we were back and forth like a married couple from the coin toss. So I get it. I know it's not traditional to not defer in those type of situations. But to your point, when it comes to Joe Burrow, I think the thought process there is, gosh, we've got to get ahead and play from ahead every possession, or, with a rookie quarterback and things like that, we just may never have an opportunity. So that's kind of where I guess I was maybe in agreement with that, but not with the other things. I know even before we got to the game potentially tying touchdown, I had texted in our group chat before, like, hey, score, go for 2. And then they didn't, and then we scored again later. But I put it in another chat, and I had some disagreement there too. You can't go into a stadium with the hottest quarterback in the NFL in his stadium when you're just fighting to stay alive. Like, you were lucky, in my opinion, to tie it. You go for 2 there. And with the press conference with like, oh, yeah, we make the playoffs with a tie or a win. Dude, win that game in regulation and get the hell out of there. It makes no sense to me. Everybody, different people that I was texting with are like, oh, this is the right decision. Well, it ultimately was not the right decision. Joe Burrow, as soon as we lost the coin toss, obviously we played good defense. We got the ball a couple of times. We had opportunities, hence why I said missed opportunity. But he's that dude. He might be the best quarterback in the NFL. You give him a better defense and a solid offensive line,
Dynasty.
It could change the dynamic of who's the quarterback of this era. He's that good. The dude is a freak. And obviously injuries have changed stuff like that, but he was that dude coming out of LSU with one of the most epic college seasons of all time. And now he just put together an NFL record 8 250 plus 3 touchdown games in a row. It's just, you take the 2 there, you lose. What does it matter? It's the same thing we came up with this game anyway. I think it was the wrong decision in that situation. And I'm sure you'll have other thoughts on the coaching stuff. And I know you had texted a couple times, run the ball. It felt like every time Jaleel touched the ball, he got 11 yards. So I'm not really sure why we didn't ride that, if we're going to ride the hot hand, because that dude was unstoppable in the run game, it felt like. And then, of course, it's rotation. Take him out. You just got 11 yards. We probably should let somebody else run the ball. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. It's why we're going to lose in the first round if we make it. Frustrating. We'll get into the stuff for next week, but yeah, that's kind of my frustrations, I guess, with yesterday's decision making and final score.
Yeah, no, we share the same frustrations with the coach, because unlike pretty much everything else yesterday, we agree that the Broncos should have went for two. There's no question about it. You're the road team. You're playing, like you said, the best, hottest quarterback on the planet right now, and you have a chance to put him away and not give him the football back. Why would you not take that? Especially in the situation where you do not necessarily have to win this game, but if you win it, you're in the playoffs. And Bo Nix, right away, as soon as they scored, you saw him. He was like, let's go. We're going for two. We're going for two. And then to make matters worse for Sean Payton, they had extra time to drop a play because they were reviewing the Mims touchdown, right?
Yep.
So in my head, I was like, and I was watching with my sister, and I was like, they're going for two. They are going for two. There's no question. Sean Payton is a riverboat gambler. They are going to go for two. And when they had extra time to think about it and then send out the kicker, I was very confused by that. But I want to go back to another thing that you said there, Sean, about the coaching with Jaleel McLaughlin. 10 carries, 69 yards, 6.9 yards per carry for those of you at home who are not good at math. That that's really good. And the Bengals defense is just terrible. Okay. And they were missing two of their best players yesterday, Sheldon Rankins and Sam Hubbard. Their corners were nothing but rookies, basically. You have like no speed on that defense whatsoever. And the Broncos, my frustration was nowhere with Bo Nix yesterday. It's with Sean Payton. And the thing is yes, Bo Nix threw that interception, and yes, they ran the same play from when they thought they sealed the game against Kansas City, that same, sprint right, throw the ball to Cortland, and he was not open, by the way, this time. And Nick's just does this sometimes where he's like, I'm throwing it no matter what. That's my guy. That's the play. We're throwing it, and if it gets there, it gets there, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But Bo Nix, when he was let loose yesterday, was really good. Man, that throw to Mims was incredible. That was his best throw of the season, without question, right? But here's the thing: is we're in essentially a must-win game, right, for both teams, and it's like, why are we running this elementary check down, not trusting Bo Nix kind of offense? I don't know how many times we threw the ball just straight down the line of scrimmage yesterday on a screen, or we tried to hit a running back on a screen at terrible times, mind you. And I think we saw when Bo had the opportunity and the time to make a play downfield, he made a lot of great plays, and he used his legs, and he was able to recognize man coverage and take off, in those situations, especially on third downs. But it really seems like that Sean Payton was kind of babying him yesterday and not really trusting him to go out and win the game. And I don't know what else this guy has to do. He ties the game on 4th and 1 with what was it, 8 seconds to go or something like that.
Yeah.
What else does he have to do for you to like take the training wheels off full time? It's very frustrating to watch the Broncos. And I said this all week because I don't think the Broncos offense is good. And it's partly because of Sean Payton. They had 17 points, Sean, late in the fourth quarter with 8 seconds to go. 17 points against arguably the worst defense in the NFL. That's frustrating to watch. And I told you guys, I was like, if they run the football, they're going to win the game. They run the football, they're going to win the game. And they didn't run the football. He just doesn't want to do it. He wants to showcase Bo Nix. He wants to prove everybody that he's right when it comes to the draft pick, and that's fine. But at some point, man, if he's your guy, then let him loose. And I know the past couple of weeks he's been a little bit reckless with the football, but I mean, you can't put the training wheels back on him after you took him off earlier this year, right, Sean? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think to answer your question with the lateral passes and things like that, I think that's his justification to not running the ball. Those are his running plays and the wide receiver screens and the lateral passes and trying to do things like that. Instead of just running the damn ball with someone averaging almost 7 yards a carry. what is the deal, dude? Like, I get it. I get that's part of the offense, and I think when the personnel calls for it, that makes sense. And Marvin Mims is turning into a Weapon X type of player, and so I get it. And I think that that's where, like, if you just break down every play and you add those to the running game, then maybe it's close to what a typical team would run the football. But when you're running the football well against a bad defense, it's just not necessary. And it's higher risk and, to the point of yesterday, less reward because it did not work. When you had something that traditional is working great, you paid the offensive line, they run block well, and you're averaging the yards per carry that you need to keep. And what's the whole thing that we needed to do yesterday? If you're not going to score 30 against the Bengals, you have to keep the ball out of Joe Burrow's hand. And if you're rushing the ball like that, then you just continue to do it. When it's all said and done, it's a one possession game. You give Joe Burrow one less possession because you possessed the ball and ran the damn ball, then maybe there's a different outcome. So, but to answer your question, I think that's why they do the lateral passing, and that's just his way to manipulate it and get running plays for non-running plays. But to the throw, to your point, 67 air yards, the farthest air yard throw in the NFL this year from a rookie quarterback. And Mims, when he gets on a seam, that dude is a freak show. And then he goes up and gets a jump ball, and going back to that 2-point conversion, man, you have the defense on their heels. The crowd is in shock. Nobody can believe it. Dude, go for the throat, man. Step on the neck and let's go, man. But you put Bo in play action, and something like that happens. He runs it in. There's a million different things. John Elway helicopter. I don't know what the heck he does, but I guarantee you it's better than what happened in overtime, where you couldn't even get a first down or move the ball, or it's just you had the opportunities. I think it's a little too cute for a team that's not like there. Like, we're not the Chiefs. We're not throwing backwards passes, around the back passes, and left-handed passes, and like we don't need any of that. If you're going to run the ball well, just give the ball to him. Zach Allen had an absolutely insane game. 3 sacks, I think he had.
3.
It's
Yep.
just, the penetration that we had. I know we were kind of back and forth again on the defense and how they were playing, but honestly, I think it was more just they were on the field too much. They were effective when Surtain was on Chase. I mean, he didn't catch the ball, but the second you go to zone coverage, the dude looks like McConkey did last week. He's wide open in the middle of the field. Every time you put blanking on 29's name right now.
McMillan.
McMillan. Every time that dude was in coverage on Chase, it was a first down. So he might as well have been Levi Wallace yesterday, man. It was just every time he went to zone coverage, and it's like the dude's the best receiver in the NFL, and Pat Surtain is doing what Pat Surtain does. So let's just stay there. Why are we going anywhere different? So, there were some different decisions on defense that I didn't necessarily agree with as well, but T. Higgins is an animal too. So I understand, there's kind of pick your poison type thing there, but I don't remember Surtain being on T like at all yesterday. So it was clear that he was there to cover Chase. Pass rush was great. I think the secondary did a great job in man coverage. I think they're a poor zone coverage team.
Very
And
bad.
For Riley Moss, I know he said he ate a turd sandwich. Hey man, if you're going to play opposite side of Pat Surtain, you're going to have days like that. You're going to get picked on your whole career. It's just how it is when you have the best corner in the league on the other side. The other dude's just going to get thrown at. And so, when you have to cover T. Higgins and he's a bona fide number 1 in the NFL, you're going to have days like that. So I don't fault Riley. I know he took it hard on himself, but I don't think that it was his fault. I think it's squarely on the offense and the coaching, in my opinion.
Yeah. In talking about Riley Moss, I agree with you. And for us to expect Riley Moss to be Riley Moss in his first game back against
Unfair.
the Bengals, is just crazy. And the Broncos, man, outside of that Colts game, these last 3 games, Sean, they have allowed 1,193 passing yards. I think a lot of that has to do with something that we've talked about in the past, where Vance was a little less aggressive with Riley Moss out of the lineup. There was way too much zone, a lot more zone that the Broncos were running because they did not trust the other cornerback on the other side of the field, which if that's the case, Denver, we need to be drafting a cornerback in the first 2 rounds or something, or signing somebody, because if we're that bad, or if we lose our identity that much without Riley Moss, then we need some more depth there. But that's a discussion for the offseason, I think. But I'm not really mad at Riley Moss. Riley Moss is a guy that goes out there and plays his heart out. He's a guy that goes out and makes tackles. He's a great tackler. He goes out and makes tackles in the run game. He's not afraid to put his nose in there. And so, I don't really have a lot of bad things to say about Riley Moss, because it was his first game back, and that's T. Higgins, and that's Joe Burrow. And they have to throw it somewhere. And like you said, if they're not going to throw it at Surtain, they're most certainly going to throw it at the other guy. My concern with the Broncos defense right now is what I just said: 1,193 yards in the last 3 games, if you don't count the Colts, which I don't, because Richardson's awful. But there is something to be said for the Broncos pass rush has been outstanding all season long, and they were amazing in this game. So for them to give up 412 yards to Joe Burrow and only allow 10, he only had 10 incompletions, for them to have that kind of pass rush and for him to still have that kind of game, you just kind of tip your cap to Joe Burrow in that case, right? He's just a great quarterback, man. And one thing that the Broncos did try to do, especially late in the game, but when the Bengals fumbled the clock the first time, they blitzed him on 3rd down. And he's so good that he knows where you're coming from. He knows, where he's going with the football. He knows who he trusts. And that's the difference between him and other quarterbacks in the league. And I'm not even going to say Bo Nix, because Bo Nix was outstanding yesterday. But he's just that dude, man, like you said. And I think you just tip your cap to him and how well he played. And the other thing I want to say too, Sean, to your point, is don't give him the ball back.
Yeah.
What are you doing, man?
Yeah.
And you would think, right, that with Sean Payton as your head coach, that, oh, dude, he's going for it. He's got Bo Nix. It's his quarterback. It's not Russell Wilson back there, It's his guy. And for them to not even line up to see what the Bengals would look like defensively is just insane. And did they have that timeout? No, they didn't have that timeout. So that would have been – but you take the delay of game and you kick the extra point, right?
Sure, yeah.
So for me,
you sack up and you go for it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. I mean, they couldn't stop Bo Nix all night long with his legs. Why don't you run an RPO there? Why don't you run that fake toss sweep and roll him out the other way? And he's probably out there by himself, and he runs it in for the 2 points, and we win the game. It's like,
or you run that play that the Chiefs run in the Super Bowl, that motion in with Marvin Mims, motion him back out to the edge, something like that. Their defense isn't good enough. We should have won the game right there.
Their defense is terrible, and that was the most frustrating part for me yesterday. Is they had 3 points at halftime, Sean, against arguably, again, the worst defense in the NFL without 2 of their best players. So I think Sean Payton, we've seen the best of Sean Payton, and we've seen the worst of Sean Payton this year, right? So the best example would be the first half against the Chargers. That dude was in his bag in the first half. He couldn't do anything wrong. All those plays worked. He was calling a perfect game, okay? And then you come to this game, and he's playing a worse defense, and he doesn't trust his quarterback for some reason. His quarterback, who, by the way, if you correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, he did not turn the football over last week against Chargers, right?
I don't think so.
So what are we doing? I don't understand. We have this mentality, and I'm one of those people that it's like, okay, we hear these guys talk, especially Sean Payton, all week. We got to do this. We got to do that. And then you don't do it. Eventually, it's just falling on deaf ears. And I want to keep things in perspective, because I was furious yesterday that the Broncos lost this game, because I think the Bengals are a completely inferior football team, Joe Burrow notwithstanding. Would you agree?
Yeah, outside of Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, we should win that game.
the Broncos have the personnel to at least quell them a bit, right? They didn't, but they have the personnel to do it. And so the frustrating thing for me is the Broncos this year haven't played well against teams with a winning record. And these last 2 weeks, they haven't really played well at all as a team. They can't seem to put it together. So in the first half against the Chargers, the offense looked amazing, right? And then in the second half, the defense looked horrible, right? So it's like you can't have both. You can't have one or they never put it together for one whole game. And that's a frustrating thing for me. And that comes down to coaching. You don't want your players to ruin offensive drives with a penalty, then coach them better. You know, like I don't know what else to say. Like he blames his players. That's your fault, Sean Payton. That's not the players' fault. I mean, they commit the penalty, sure, but ultimately discipline comes down to what, Sean? Coaching, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, we kind of talked about it at the tail end last week, and as we kind of move forward and probably, obviously talking next week and into, the playoffs or not, I think it's one of those things where, again, we're in one of those situations where we're taking our lumps now because we're just not ready. And we've exceeded expectations. We're going to have a winning season. I think based on who we're going to play next week from a personnel standpoint, we're going to make the playoffs. But with all that said, it's not necessarily because we earned it or we deserve it here at the tail end. You controlled your own destiny and you didn't do what you needed to do. But I do remember championship teams doing that on their way to their path or when they're ready. Bo Nix is not Joe Burrow yet. Bo Nix is not Josh Allen. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Lamar Jackson. So we're going to have to go into the offseason and we need a slot corner. We need a tight end that's a threat. We need a running back that you're willing to give the ball 25 times to if he's not on this roster. So there's things like that, and we're going to have the money, and we have our picks finally. We're not strapped under trading picks for coaches and quarterbacks anymore. So,
Thank you.
Look, they already said Patrick Mahomes isn't playing. Patrick Mahomes isn't playing. Travis Kelce's not playing. Chris Jones isn't playing, right? If you don't beat this team, then we're worse than we thought we were. And if you do beat this team, great. Let's enjoy the fact that we were supposed to win 5.5 games. We've kicked the playoff drought, and we have something to build upon because you're about to get rolled in Buffalo. So I do think we're going to make the playoffs. I do think that Carson Wentz is no slouch. I mean, he's been the butt of jokes for a long time, but the year that the Eagles won the Super Bowl, he was an MVP candidate. So it's not like he's a nobody, but he is a backup quarterback. He will be playing with backup players because the Chiefs do have injuries. And I think that the Broncos will have something to prove. And I think they'll finally play that way because their back's against the wall. So I do think we'll win that game. But I do think I think it's the Nuggets before the Aaron Gordon trade. We still need something to get us over the hump. I don't think we have all those players yet. Maybe that's T. Higgins in the offseason, to get a wide receiver one or you draft, we're going to draft, gosh, in the 20s now. So that guy may not be available. But, I just think it's I'm happy and disappointed at the same time because we exceeded expectations. It's been a fun ride. But I think, like, barring a miracle, like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel here. So it's it's bittersweet, if you will. I don't know what the cliche is that I'm, trying to put to it, but I feel like we've got 2 more games under our belt this season until we're Nuggets and Avs fans for the remainder of the winter.
Go Dogs. But yes, go Avs and Nuggets for sure. It takes me a day to cool down, which I have. Sean probably can tell you he wanted to choke me through the phone yesterday. You're right. You're absolutely right. This is a winning season for the Broncos. Regardless of what happens on Sunday, they will have a winning record, right? And more importantly, the Raiders slipped to the 8th pick today. So thank you for that.
Yep.
But I have to remind myself too, because I'm the one who was telling our fans earlier this year, we have to be patient. We have to keep things in perspective. And I got a little too caught up in like thinking that, these guys are, the Bills or the Chiefs or the Rams or these teams that are usually good. They're not there yet. You're correct. And what this reminds me of, Sean, and we'll talk about the Chiefs here in a second. What this reminds me of, if the Broncos make the playoffs, you remember back in like the early mid 2000s, we would like make the playoffs and it would just be like, okay, we made the playoffs, but we got to go play the Colts, Peyton Manning, and we would lose like 49-10 or whatever. That's what this is going to be. It's going to be that. When they play the Bills. And I don't think that, again, I really, really think that the Bills have a lot to prove. They have the stigma to break, right? But after watching the Broncos against inferior offenses, specifically the Colts and the Chargers, they're not gonna have a good time against the Bills. The only thing that can equalize that game is turnovers, which the Broncos, we've talked about, are very good at creating turnovers, especially at the right time. Last night, Patrick Surtain, that was a great play. But before, Sean, we get into the playoffs, there's a game to play on Sunday, right? And there's a lot of people saying, well, the Chiefs don't want the Bengals in the playoffs. I really don't buy that at all because they're the Chiefs. They can beat anybody. They have home field. The Bengals defense is horrible. So I really don't think they care. What I do think they care about is that they would like to keep the Broncos out of the playoffs just because it's a division rivalry and you have a chance to go in there and ruin their party. Now, like you said, they're not going to play some of their guys. This is still a very, very good football team. Depth-wise, that's why they're the defending Super Bowl champions. This is why all they do is win. They're 15-1, right? 15-1. So there is a reason for that. And I think the Broncos need to come to play, Sean, on Sunday, or the Chiefs are going to send them home. And you want to talk about going out with a whimper after you had a 91% chance to make the playoffs going into the Charger game. That would be a bad look, Sean. And the last thing I would say about that before I send it off to you is it really, I guess it depends on your perspective. But from my perspective, backing into the playoffs with a win against the JV Kansas City Chiefs is not exactly something I feel like celebrating myself. But I'm kind of an OCD kind of person. I have unrealistic expectations. I need things to look a certain way, right? Otherwise, it looks like failure to me. So that's from my perspective. It just doesn't feel successful if you have to get into the playoffs like that. But what are your thoughts on that and the Chiefs game itself?
Yeah, I mean, when you played your game plan against the Chiefs A team, you should have won. You're a blocked field goal away from a victory there before anyway. So, if you play a game like that against the JV team, you should win. And to your point about backing in, I think backing in would be losing to the Chiefs and Miami and Cincinnati lose next week or something like that. That's more backing in. And while it isn't as glamorous beating the JV team, at least it is a win. At least you earned it yourself. It wasn't gifted to you because the other teams didn't do what they were supposed to do. Like the Colts losing to the Giants. Things like that. That's a different feeling, and I 100% agree. If that's how you get in, I mean, of course, all you have to do is get in the tournament, and anything can happen. But I think a win is a win there. I think there's some confidence there, but I don't think it matters either. So I do think that we'll win. I do think that we're healthy enough. We have the guys. You take tight end out of the equation, which we can't cover still. That's what Torch does for half of those 400 yards yesterday. So when you take Kelsey out, I know Noah Gray's no slouch. So, you're still going to have to cover there,
He's
but you
great.
don't have both. You don't have both of them, so I've got to assume Pacheco is not going to play given his injuries this season. So I mean, if you lose this game, it's an absolute embarrassment. But
Agreed.
I do think that they're going to win. I do think that they're going to want it. I think it's going to be important to them. I think it's going to be part of a culture building. Hey, we're a free agent destination. Look, we made the playoffs. Come to us. I think all those things matter this weekend, and I think they're going to take care of business. Like I said, I don't think that it matters when it comes to the playoffs, but I do think if we're just focusing on this week and what I think is going to happen, you know, we didn't play our best game and we had a chance against the Bengals. We should have won. We should have won for 2. We should have won. We should have beat the Chiefs a handful of weeks ago. They blocked a field goal. You know, it's just that we're here. We're this close to being where we need to be. And there's some things that we need to do and that we need to learn, and we will. But I do think that there's going to be a victorious Sunday. I think Broncos country will have a great thing to celebrate. You know, you were supposed to be a top 10 drafting team. And I still believe, and I said it weeks and weeks and weeks ago when Steven was still talking about us being a rebuilding year. And I was hyping us up way back then, saying we were going to make the playoffs. I still believe in this team. I still believe we're going to do that. So I will be picking us to win given those circumstances this weekend.
Yeah. I probably would imagine that D-Hop ain't going to play either because he's been complaining about their schedule and he probably needs some rest too. But Andy Reid's not that guy. He's not just going to come in here and lay down. You know, he's going to want to win the game. I don't know if I was in that situation, if I would want to rest our players and give them 2 weeks off, because then you got the whole rust.
Days.
Yeah, you got the whole rust factor. And, you know, I guess that's something that they can do because they're the Chiefs and they know what they're doing because they've won Super Bowls or whatever. But, you know, if I was the Broncos, I'd be like, man, I don't know. That's kind of tough. But to your point, yes, win the game. Yes, if you lose the game, it will be extremely embarrassing. And I guess you are right when it comes to backing in because, and this is the whole thing I'm talking about, where I need to reframe how I see things sometimes. And hearing somebody else's perspective helps me do that a little bit. So it's not backing in if we win the game and we take care of our own business, right? But it is backing in if we lose and then we need the Bengals and the Dolphins or whoever to lose as well. Let me be clear, though. I still think that the Dolphins and Bengals are inferior football teams to the Broncos on their best days, especially the Dolphins. And like you said, the Broncos just didn't play their best game yesterday. And I want to ask you a question off of that, Sean. Have the Broncos played their best game this year? Have they played a full 60 minutes against anybody?
Tampa?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, and that's before I think they are who they are now. So do I think if I had to pick the perfect game for this team, not projecting into next year or anything like that, and obviously us being better, do I think they played a full 60 minutes at the best of their ability at the peak of what they've shown this year? I do not. But do I think that, you know, they played I think Tampa was a complete game. I think there are some wins in there. There were some, you know, really fun celebratory wins, you know, especially when we were beating up on the teams we were supposed to beat up on, you know, and we saw what this offense could be. So I think that there are some things there. But when you turn it over and you say, oh gosh, when we played teams that are good, we did not. And that's kind of, you know, that's part of the growth. Like you can't be like 10% or however you would, you know, we're like 1-7 against teams with winning records. I know the Bengals don't technically have a winning record, but you know, they're right there as a potential playoff team. You know, how can you expect to go into the playoffs and beat anybody? Because that's all you're going to play are teams that have winning records. You know, this isn't the Eastern Conference in the NBA where some slouch in the 8 seed has a losing record, you know? So it's, it's not our time yet. But, you know, to answer your question, maybe Tampa, but I just, you know, we're young, you know, we're young in the most important positions. And so, you know, this will be, I think a victory will go a long way, like I said, but, and maybe this Sunday will be that game.
Yeah, I have genuine concerns, and I'm not saying he's a bad coach by any means, because he's not. He's proven that. But I do have concerns that the Broncos may not get to where they expect to get under Sean Payton, just because and he did this in New Orleans, and I said this all the time back then. I didn't have a podcast or anything, but he gets too cute in these games, these big games. And he has a tendency to lose these games because of his ego. And he doesn't do, you know, what his football team is best at. And I just have concerns moving forward. I know we're good this year. We have a winning record this year, and that's mainly because we beat up on really bad teams. And that's fine. But I do have concerns about Sean Payton moving forward just because in these big moments, man, sometimes I just don't know what he's doing. And I get that the Broncos are young, but he is still the same guy. Like he's the head coach. He's the one that makes the decisions. He's the one that has to put the players in position to succeed. And I just have genuine concerns about the direction that the Broncos want to go as far as winning Super Bowls under Sean Payton. Do you share those same concerns at all?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the architect is not the one that gets the title. Steve Kerr did not draft that team. Gary Kubiak did not put that team together.
No.
Those were previous regimes. And so, but Mike Malone did. Mike Malone did put that team together. So there's I guess examples of both. I do see what you're saying, and I think the problem is the coach has to be the one to put us over the hump, like Andy Reid, because the AFC is not going to get any easier for the next 10 years. All these future Hall of Famer quarterbacks are in their 20s. So, or 20s, or if they're in their 30s, they're just over 30. We've got a decade of these dudes still being a part of it. And I get it. Joe Flacco got his one, and sometimes somebody was able to, dethrone Brady or Manning, but
it's those three. It's Burrow, Mahomes, Jackson.
Yeah, and maybe Allen. So it's one of those things, to your point, where if he doesn't push the right buttons, you have a gauntlet to go through year in and year out. Even if Bo Nix is a great quarterback, Dan Marino didn't win a championship. Jim Kelly didn't win a championship. And they had to go through John and, and other quarterbacks in those times. So just because Bo is great, he needs his Andy Reid, just like Pat has. So, only time will tell. But I absolutely share the same concern that you have, because that's the mountain we have to climb.
Yeah, and on that topic, Sean, a big, big lift of the cap for me for Bo Nix yesterday, because I don't know if I've ever heard a louder environment that the Broncos have played in years. That place was insanely loud. And for a rookie quarterback to go in there and not go toe-to-toe necessarily with Joe Burrow, but to make the plays when he needed to, man, that throw to Mims, the 67-yard air throw, that was just insane. And then to make the play necessary to tie the game at the end, it takes a special dude to make plays like that, right? Yep. And so I do think that there were a lot of positives yesterday. Zach Allen, like you said, was a monster, and the Broncos are going to have to figure out how to keep him here for a long time. And the pass rush was very good. And I think that, the defense did get eaten up, but Surtain he forced that fumble at the right time. That was another missed opportunity, right? Where Sean Payton, it's like, what are you calling? We're at midfield and you're calling screens. Like, what are we doing? And it was a 3-and-out, I believe. But I just want to say that there were a lot of positives yesterday that I wasn't able to see at the time because I was being an idiot. But all in all, I think what I'd like to see, and maybe not this week, Sean, maybe in the playoffs, I still want to see the Broncos as a team, as a coaching staff, play a complete game. If you go into Buffalo, let's say we make the playoffs, you go into Buffalo and you lose by between 3 and 10 points, I think that shows a lot. If you go into Buffalo and you lose 45-10, that's that's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth for the rest of the offseason. I don't think that we've seen the best game from the Broncos yet, though. I'm still waiting to see that, and maybe we don't see it this year because, like you said, it's not our time yet. We're that, the upstart when the Bills were their upstart, right? When they were good, they made the playoffs, but they weren't. You knew that they had some losing to do, right? Some learning to do. And so if we take that kind of path, the same thing that the Bills have gone through, maybe we have to lose in the playoffs 3 or 4 times before we get to the top, right? Maybe, we don't win the division for another 2 or 3 years because the Chiefs are just that good all the time. But as long as we're making strides in the right direction and Sean Payton is putting his players in the position to succeed, that's all I really care about. I still have a bitter taste in my mouth about this weekend. I know it's not backing in, but it's just they should have taken care of business in the last 2 weeks. And honestly, Sean, and I don't want to revisit this too much, but we're one drop touchdown away from whatever the scenario would be this weekend. Had Taylor not dropped the football before the end zone with the Colts, the Broncos would have lost 3 games in a row at this point. And who knows, right? Maybe they come out more desperate than the Bengals yesterday, and they win the game because they're and they're in that position. But the Broncos have gotten lucky a lot this year. They've had their hearts broken a lot this year, but that's football. That's going to happen to every team except the Chiefs because they're on the payroll apparently, or they have the refs on the payroll. But let's just see what happens this weekend. I'm not putting a win in the bank at all for the Broncos because the Chiefs are the Chiefs, man, and we've had trouble with them. And let's not forget Carson Wentz was once a MVP candidate before he got hurt with the Eagles, so that he can play a little bit, right? So I don't think that we should pack it in and just say, "Oh yeah, we're going to beat the Chiefs and then we're going to go to the playoffs." The Broncos have to go out there and actually prove that they're going to win the game.
I think the great thing and the thing we can hang our hat on no matter what happens is Bo gives us a chance. So, to your point, he didn't necessarily go toe to toe, but he gave us every opportunity to win that game.
Yeah.
And, this is his first rodeo. So if he can do that now and he can prove that he gives us an opportunity to win, I'm good with that. You know what I mean? If he gives us a chance, if he's putting the ball in the end zone, he's protecting the ball. Look, he's going to throw the damn ball. If he throws one interception, we've got the defense where we can usually overcome that. You know what I mean? So I'm not. Give it to Bo. In Bo, we trust. I think he's going to win this weekend. If he gives us that shot in Buffalo, you never know, man. I mean, he's kept us in games ever since the leash has come off. To your point, the training wheels have come off. I think I think the important part is no matter what happens, we have our guy. We found our guy. He's capable. He's confident. He's everything that we've been looking for. He's everything that Paxton and Drew weren't, in the draft picks. So, you can hang your hat on that. You can hope that whoever Vegas picks in April is the Paxton Lynch for them, and they can just continue to go through it because that would make me just as happy. But, like I said, Bo gives us an opportunity, and I'm super happy that he's proven us wrong because I know when pre-draft guys, we were in the trade down camp, get a guy next year, go get Brock Bowers, do those types of things. So I'm happily proven wrong. Yeah, exactly. I'm happily proven wrong. I'm happy that, Bo's going to be here for, decade plus. So I think we're going to win this weekend. I'm happy for the Broncos and I would love to be surprised in the playoffs.
So in summary, Sean, before we wrap this thing up, Sean Payton, get your stuff together, man. Either take the training wheels off or, you got to figure something out. Let him loose. If we're not going to run the football, let him loose. If he turns the ball over, he turns the ball over. Just go down with your best guy. And that's by far our best guy, right?
Live and die with Bo this weekend.
And then Bo, keep doing what you're doing, man. I clearly was wrong about you, but I've already admitted that, so we're good. And then, keep Marvin Mims involved in the offense because that dude is turning into a beast for the Broncos. And then defensively, I think just get back to the identity, right? Get back to being more of a man coverage team, which they were for the most part against the Bengals. But get back to that shutdown defense that we saw earlier this season, and I think they'll have a good opportunity to do that against Carson Wentz, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's let's keep the momentum that we do have, because we still control our own destiny. Let's win the game. Let's go to the playoffs. And like you said, Sean, we do think that the Broncos would get absolutely destroyed by the Bills, but they have to play the game, right? The Bills could turn the ball over 5 times in that game. We don't know. You never know.
Snowing.
Yeah, they got to play the game. So
Yep.
Let's just take it week by week, and let's take down the Chiefs and get ready for the playoffs.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in to the podcast. Again, I'm Mile High Mez, and this is Sean. This is the Broncos Source Podcast. We'll be with you after the Chiefs game, and hopefully the Broncos will have clinched a playoff berth at that time. We'll talk to you then, and go Broncos.